everybody. David and Kelly Pritchard. And first, we just want to say we're just so grateful to be here. And we just want to say thank you to all of the Young Lives leaders and staff. And you guys truly are our heroes. And we're just grateful that you do what you do. And because of that, you guys are all here. And we're just grateful to be here.
Actually, I'm really sad that we're not with you in person. We would love to have been with you during this time and meet all of you and see your beautiful children. And I am so sorry that we're not there in person because you all are some of our most favorite people, like David just said. Yeah,
and I mean, truth be known, like we have some stories in our own family that we might understand your journey far better than you would imagine, but that's for another day. We can have that conversation. We would love to another time. But we are going to jump in just because of the amount of time. Real quickly, we've been married 38 years. We have 11 kids. 6 of them are married. In fact, we just our 6th one just got married in December. So we tell people 6 down, 5 to go. And we have 12 grandkids. The 13th is due on Valentine's Day. So all that to say, we love family, we love kids, and it's part of why we're so excited to be here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. David was on Young Life staff for about 20 years. In our last position, we served as family enrichment specialist. And that just means we came around Young Life leaders to help them serve out of healthy marriages and parenting and family, because we think that's super important, that whatever job you're doing, it's important that your family's healthy so you can do the best job you can in your work.
Yeah, and today I am currently the family ministries pastor at Lake City Community Church, and then Kelly and I continue to do ministry like this, and we co-lead a marriage ministry, so we continue to do a lot of ministry together. Mm-hmm. So with that, again, just in the interest of time, we're going to jump in, and today we're going to talk about 2 things very quickly, but these are really, from our vantage point, these are really important. And the first one is simply, we want to talk about just how our parenting changes as our children get older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you might have figured out by now that you don't parent the same way with infants as you do with your teenagers that are ready to leave your home. And so this teaching really helped us think about our parenting and how we wanted to grow and change as our kids grow and change.
Yeah, and then the second thing we want to talk about is just simply the 3 most important things to teach your child. There's a lot of things to teach your children, but we believe that these 3 are the most important things. And so we're gonna do those, cover those 2 things. And by the way, either of these could be a 2-hour seminar all by itself. And so we realize that in some ways it's going to be kind of an overview, but we hope to leave you with enough, with a few tools so that you can actually put some of this into practice.
Yeah, a few takeaways.
Yes.
Yeah. So before we jump in, we would like you to pause the video and we want you to answer this question. What do you think is the biggest influence on how you parent your kids today? And we'd like you to think about how you were parented and how that affects how you are going to parent.
Yeah, so pause the video, talk about that for a few minutes, and then jump back in right here. All right, so how'd we do? We would tell you that in our opinion, and I think it's probably pretty generally true out there, you'll find that the thing that impacts our parenting the most is how we were parented. There's so many times that I find myself thinking, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm about to say this. And I'll say the exact words that my parents said to me as I was growing up. And I think we all find ourselves doing that. But we share that with you partly because I think it's a good place for us to start. But the other reason is because it helps us understand that just because we saw our parents parenting doesn't mean we fully understand why they were doing things, or maybe they didn't fully understand why they were doing things. And so there can be some real misses in our parenting. Obviously, there'll be some really great things that we'll garner from that, but there can also be some misses. And so part of what we're going to do is try to help us get a clearer picture of like how this process of parenting goes.
Yeah. And for example, sometimes I've talked to parents that say, my parents were so hard on me, I'm not going to be like that with my kids. But the other extreme of that, the opposite of that, is letting your kids do whatever they want, which I'm not sure is the best. Or parents that have done not a lot of boundaries, and parents are saying, I want more boundaries. So it's all tricky to think about how you were parented. Some have no healthy model of how parenting works, and they come to parenting with no idea what to do with their kids. And we talk to parents in that realm too. So overall, I just want to say, to start here, there's no perfect parents. That all of us come to this parenting gig a little bit worried and a little bit nervous about how to be an effective, loving parent.
Yeah. So as we jump in, this first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about and we're going to actually give you a link so you can download this for yourself. But it's a flyer that we created just called Ages and Life Stages. And so please feel free to download that, and even, you could do that now and be able to look at it as we're talking. But depending on your kids' ages, you may or may not have already noticed that how we parent them changes drastically as they get older. And, in other words, parenting a toddler is so much different than parenting a teenager. We're going to assume, because we're talking to young lives, that most of you are dealing with younger kids. So we're going to maybe spend a little bit more time talking about those ages, but we'll cover all of them as we talk about this. But we want you to think in terms of our children moving from ages, birth to, through their teenage years to 18 and then into their young adult years. And what does it look like for us as parents? And so we're going to talk about it in 4 different stages.
Mm-hmm. And the first stage we want to talk about is the director stage, and that's and these are generalities. I don't want you to be legalistic about these, but this happens. The director phase happens from birth to 6 years old, and basically what directing means is the parent is directing everything that the child does. Other than bodily functions, the parent is deciding where the kid goes, where they eat, who they play with, when they sleep, when they wake up. And so the director phase is a little bit weighty responsibility, because parents are trying to be healthy in all those areas of directing their kids.
Yeah, and one of the things you'll notice on the flyer, the Ages and Life Stages, is it's a 2-page. One is just kind of an overview of what we're talking about right now, and then on the back side we have also a second page which talks a little bit about some of the different developmental stages that you'll find, and that's not to try to pigeonhole kids, but I think it's healthy for us to understand sort of how their development is happening, because that impacts their ability to even be parented in certain ways. And so with that, I just want to remind you what Kelly just said. These are generalities, or generally hold to be true. In other words, she said about 0 to 6. That doesn't mean on their 7th birthday everything changes. It's just in general, this is kind of the framework that we find that to be true. And then the next stage would be what we call the trainer stage, and that generally goes from about that 6-year age to about 12. And in the trainer stage, what we would say as parents, as the trainer, our job becomes very much the job of trying to fill their moral warehouse. In other words, and not just their moral warehouse, their warehouse period. Like we're helping them understand right from wrong. We're understanding them why. The idea there is that we are preparing them for that next stage, which, as you can imagine, or as you can suspect, that next stage of teenager can be a big one. And so we spend those trainer years really trying to pour into them, not just as in the previous stage, not just directing their life, but actually starting to train them so that they understand a little bit more about why they're doing what they're doing, and what we believe to be the things that are most important.
And this is not, I don't want this to sound robotic, because you can't your children are not robots, but there is a sense that we want them to have information and wisdom and knowledge to make good decisions. When you talk about just teaching our kids to be good thinkers, they have to have some information around what we want them to be thinking about as they grow up. So hiding God's word in their heart, for example, and really doing some role playing with them when they're 6 to 12, saying, what if someone wants you to go into a store and take something without paying for it? What are you going to do? What are you going to say? It's all those kinds of scenarios, things that come up in the kids' lives with friends. We want to be able to really talk about those and then say, here's what our family believes and here's why.
Yeah. And then the next stage is the stage we call coaching. And again, this is kind of that teenage age group right in there. And what we love about the coaching stage is this is where I am a coach. I've coached football for many years. And what I love about that analogy is that, like a coach, you go to a football game and you'll see the coach standing where? On the sideline. We've practiced, we've taught them everything we can during the week, and then we, in a sense, in the game, we send them out and we let them play the game, and then we're still there on the sideline so they can come back and say, oh man, that didn't go well, and we can dust them off and kind of say to them, well, why don't you try this? And then we kind of send them back out in the game. And so that's kind of that coaching where they put into practice some of the things that we've been training into them.
Mm-hmm. And coaching is a little bit of a scary phase for parents, because parents, especially in today's culture, want to control their kids and make sure that everything around them is safe and healthy. It just maybe does not set them up very well to launch into a world where young adults need a sense of confidence, and they need to have been taught how to think and how to prepare for consequences, how to make great decisions and resolve conflict. So that coaching phase is super important, that we ask good questions and we let our kids know that nobody loves them like their dad and I, and that we're always here for them, but that they've got to start learning how to make big decisions on their own. We don't stop parenting during coaching, but we parent way differently again than in the beginning. And then the last phase is we call the consultant phase, and that's 18 and beyond, where we hopefully have set up such a great foundation with our kids that we're seen as a safe place to come back and ask questions. My favorite line these days is, I try to stay in my lane. So unless my kids come to me and say, Mom, what do you think if, or what do you think about this, that I try to stay in my lane and just pray for them. But we want to be seen as trusted advisors and healthy consultants for big things that are coming in their lives, like who to marry and what jobs to do and what college major to pursue and how to live a life that's successful in today's culture.
Yeah, and so again, we're assuming that most of you are not in that consultant phase, but hopefully it gives you kind of a vision for what's to come. And so if we could, we want to jump back into that director phase where I believe probably most of you are at right now. And I want to just add a little bit more texture to this conversation. In Ephesians 6, it says, Fathers, do not exasperate your children, but bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. And what I love about that is that those two words, training and instruction, they literally translate, the first one literally translates to train by act. The second one translates much more this idea of train by word. And so it gives you kind of a word picture. In fact, if you look at the graph that we created, it shows you that from the bottom to the top of the graph, we move from act to word. And all that means is that early in their life, as we are parenting them, we are much more training by act. And then as they get older and older, and certainly as they move into the teen years and into the adult years, our parenting becomes much more training by word. And so real quickly, Kelly's just going to talk just briefly about this whole idea of training by act with that in that director phase.
Yeah, I so wish, I'm a little bit jealous of you all, because I wish I would have had this earlier in my parenting during those early days, because it has completely changed how I interact with young children. And what training by act means is we don't spend a lot of time psychoanalyzing every situation and doing a lot of talking. Now, I'm not saying we don't talk to our kids, but when I have a 3-year-old that I'm asking to come put shoes on, or it's time to eat dinner, after I've given them like a warning and saying it's almost time for dinner, and then I want you to come to the table. When they disobey and do not come, instead of getting mad and continuing to talk or yell or go crazy, I simply go over and say, Mommy said come to the dinner table, and your answer should be yes, Mom, and I just bring them to the table. So I'm training them by act. I'm saying the words I want them to say. I am not angry or worked up. I simply have given them a chance to obey by saying, yes, Mom, and coming. And if they don't, I can still at 3 physically pick them up and say, Mommy said, please come. And you are to say, yes, Mom, and come to the table, which I know sounds pretty calm and simple. But when we get to parenting young children, we can find ourselves getting angry because they're not listening and you're saying the same things over and over and over, which means we want to train by act over and over and over during this phase.
Yeah, so much more we could say, but we'll leave that teaching with that whole idea of just trying to more and more with your toddlers especially to train by act. And then what we want to do is we want to jump into this next section very quickly. And in order to set it up, we're going to ask you another question. And that question is simply, who do you want walking out the door at 18? When you close your eyes and kind of picture that little one turning 18 and heading out the door, maybe to college or to a career, what do you picture about that person? And so if you would, just stop the video right here and just spend a little bit of time together talking about what do we want, who do we want walking out the door at 18? Go ahead and pause. All right, so how did we do? Hopefully you had a chance to maybe consider some of those things, and I don't know. I know for Kelly and I at times some of those things maybe felt like pipe dreams, but I think it's good to have a vision for what that's going to look like, and that's a good lead-in for us to just briefly talk to you a little bit about this idea of the 3 most important things to teach your child. And very quickly, the 3 things are love God, obey you, and self-control. And we'll spend just a few minutes on each one of those because there's a lot of things we need to do with our kids, a lot of things we've got to teach them. But we believe that these 3 things are really key and foundational. And so the first one is simply to love God.
Mm-hmm. And if you think about teaching your kids to love God, you immediately understand I can't make my kids love God, but there's sure a lot of salting the oats that we can do as a family to entice them to want to love God. And simply those kinds of things are my own walk with God, my own faith journey.
In fact, we would say that is the key, right? Yeah. I mean, it's got to start with us, certainly.
We sure can't give to our kids what we don't have. So, and that's not a judgment. If you are just starting out on a faith journey, it's okay, because then we just learn right along with our kids. And we've done a lot of that learning as we've taught our kids. But it's also this sense that there are big questions that our kids are going to have to answer. And we want to be prepared for those. And we want to start having these faith conversations in our home that seem very organic and very natural, not forced, but with some just real, not intuition, but some real intention on, we want to talk about where God is in all that we're doing throughout the day.
Yeah, and I would just add one thing to that, and that's simply this: God's not afraid of our questions, even our doubts, and we don't want our kids to think that God is afraid of that. We want them to ask questions like, who am I, and why am I here, and what happens after I die, and where did I come from? Those are all questions that are important, and so we want to invite our kids to be asking those kinds of questions. So the second thing that we would say in terms of these 3 most important things, and I confess that in our cultural moment, this is probably counterculture, but But we absolutely believe this. You know, the Bible says, honor your father and mother for it to go well for you. And so we tell parents all the time, if you want it to go well for your kids, then help them to respect you. And the Bible talks about obedience. And again, I get that that's a counterculture, and we're not talking about this abusive, type of obedience. We're talking about a loving, caring way that we want to parent in a way that they want to obey, but also where they recognize that it's important. That's why, like, even in the Training to Act, Kelly described that idea of telling them, I need you to say, yes, mom, and come on. And so in the same way, we want to teach our kids to, in kind of all ways, to obey us. And part of the reason that we say that is because eventually we want them to know that there is something bigger than them, and not really us, because one day we want them to come to a place where they can fall on their knees and say to God, say to Jesus, yes, and I'm ready to follow you.
Mm-hmm. And, I would say that we want to think about authority and obedience in the context of a loving relationship with parents, that children would want to obey because we've cultivated a loving relationship with them, that we know our kids, that we again are telling them there's no two people on earth that love you more than Daddy and I, and we are for you. We're in your corner, but we want you to obey us so that we can teach you the things that we think are most important. And again, like David says, I know this is tricky in our culture today. We want our kids to be able to advocate for themselves, but we also really want them to understand authority. And if our kids are screaming no in our faces, we just don't believe in the end that's going to go well for our kids.
Yeah, and I'll just leave you with one last thought on this one, and that is simply this, that the kids are the easy part. We're the ones that have a hard time getting trained in this area. Like, we're the ones that get used to just saying, pick up your shoes, pick up your shoes, pick up your shoes, pick up your shoes, until we finally blow our top and scream at them, or, yell, and then they finally go pick up their shoes. And so we've just learned that as we've gotten better at, asking our kids to do something and then expecting them to obey, and then moving, quickly to that expectation, our kids learn quickly and they respond really well to this. It's just, we have to retrain ourselves.
Yeah, we have to help each other be consistent, loving parents in that area of teaching our kids to obey.
Yeah. So the final one is simply self-control. And, the love God, certainly from a biblical perspective makes sense. Obey you. The Bible says children obey your parents, so that one makes sense. Sometimes people are like, self-control, where does that one come in? And, for us, we just learned over the years that in many ways, all the other character qualities kind of hinge on this one. In other words, we can teach our kids to be kind. We can teach our kids, all sorts of things that we want them to be when they leave our home at 18 or whenever they leave. But it's self-control that allows them to actually live that out, right? Because so often I know in my own life, I don't act the way I really want to act sometimes, or I do act in ways that I just don't want to be. And all of that comes back to self-control. And so we want to load our kids up with this character quality of self-control, and it begins young, and we just continue to do it throughout their life.
Mm-hmm. And I would just throw in on this one that we're not talking about suppressing emotions or feelings. In fact, we are big advocates of teaching kids to be able to name what they're feeling and be able to cope with feelings that are negative pretty early in life in a healthy way. So we're not talking about suppressing what they're really feeling and just having self-control no matter what. It's okay when our kids are mad to say, you seem really mad right now. Let's give you some time, and then we can really talk about what is going on here. But it's just so important that our kids learn self-control so they can be the people they really want to be. And that training starts very young in our house. In fact, this is my big takeaway for toddlers. When my toddlers are whining, I remember I had a lot of young children at the same time in my home. And I would just say, oh, mommy can't understand you till you get a big, strong voice. So why don't you go and sit on that bottom stair? They were not in trouble. I just said, why don't you go get control of yourself? And when you have a big, strong voice, you come back because I want to help you. And that seemed to help them go get control of themselves and come back so they could tell me what was going on. Think about situations, even as an adult, that would just help things go so much better if we could step away, could get ourselves together, and then walk back in and be able to talk about some hard things. That is a lifelong skill that starts very, very young at our house.
Yeah. So again, I know that was very quick, but hopefully it at least gives you a few little nuggets that you can be thinking about to love God, obey you, and self-control. And with that, we just want to kind of leave you with some closing thoughts. We mentioned earlier you can't pass on what you don't have. And so just know that your own faith journey is so important. It doesn't matter where you are in that faith journey, by the way. Even if you're listening to this and going, I'm not sure what I believe about God. That's okay. Like I said earlier, God's okay with your questions. But don't be afraid to ask them, and certainly don't be afraid to get those questions answered. I know your Young Lives leader would be happy to talk with you about that, but it begins with your own faith journey.
Mm-hmm. And then we want you to hear this too, that you can't separate your marriage from your parenting, that if you really, really, really love your kids, you'll work really hard in your relationship with your spouse, because children get a sense of security and a sense of safety and a sense of I feel like I'm in a safe and healthy place when parents are really working on growing their relationship. Now, remember, there's no perfect marriages. There's no perfect parent. So I'm not calling you to be perfect. I'm just saying it's important that you continue to grow your relationship with your spouse.
Yeah, and I'll go a step further, because there may be some of you listening who aren't even married, or maybe you've already decided to split, and now you find yourself trying to do this parenting thing. And we would say that nothing that Kelly just said would I take back, because I think that's all true in the truest sense. But I would also say it doesn't mean it's the end of the story. All it means is that whatever your situation is, so if your marriage is not healthy, or maybe it is split up, what I would say is you can't ignore that. You can't pretend like that isn't so. And instead, we would encourage you to step right into that with your kids. And, we teach parents to say words like, through no fault of your own, you have pain in your life. Because of decisions your mother and I made, we know you have pain, and we're so sorry. And then you have to step forward and parent. But all we're saying is those things that are affecting your marriage, whatever that looks like, affect your parenting. And so don't pretend like they don't exist, and instead, boldly, with God's grace, step into those things.
Mm-hmm. So good. And then we just want you to know that God is for you, that if this parenting gig seems overwhelming, or you feel super insecure, or you just don't know a lot about parenting, it's okay, because God is bigger than all of that. And I promise you that He will give you what you need to be a loving, effective parent.
Yeah, and then the last thing I wanted to share with you, or we want to leave you with, is start with some quick wins. Don't listen to this whole thing and go, oh my goodness, we got to overhaul everything. When you finish with this, we'd love for you to stop the video, talk together, and kind of, ask some questions about, okay, what can we do this week? Like, what can I do today that maybe just moves the needle just a little bit? Like, don't be afraid. Don't overwhelm yourself because, oh my goodness, here's where I am and I want to get way over there. Just look for some quick wins from just the few things that we've talked about, and then begin that journey together. All right. So thanks so much for joining us. If we could, we'd love to pray for you as we kind of sign off. Lord, thanks so much for technology and just the ability to connect with people that we haven't even met. But God, we know that you know them, and we know that you are for them. And so, Lord, I just pray your blessing on every parent listening to this video. I pray, God, that you would provide them with all that they need to be the parent that you have called them to be. I pray for wisdom. I pray for grace. I pray for courage. I pray for strength, resolve, all that they need, God, to answer this call that they have. And Lord, I do pray your blessing on the marriages represented here, on the families represented here. I pray, Lord, that they would truly know that you are for them. And if you are for them, who can be against them? We love you and praise you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, everybody.